Hi, everybody. It's very nice to be here. I know the UC campuses very well, but I didn't know UC San Diego, and I've been going to school on the school. And your orientation, I should turn this on, shouldn't I? Your orientation towards Oshaka. And I hope that, my presentation today, my remarks, has value for you. And if it doesn't, then please don't be shy in terms of directing me to what you really want to know coming from this presentation. But as Aaron said, what we're here to talk about today, what I'm here to talk about is what's called purpose-driven brand. It's really about purpose-driven leadership and the role of communications in building purpose, embedding purpose into companies, organizations, associations, any group that has a lot of people, multiple stakeholders. How do you create a coalition of the willing, as it were, to move the organization towards its goals? So, communications obviously can play a large part, I would even argue a leading part in moving towards that North Star, defining the North Star and moving towards it. And so, these are some of the questions that I think were part of the synopsis that you may have seen. Some, fundamental questions. How do you create a value proposition that can engage all of your stakeholders in a manner that's valuable for all? How do you embed inspiration to, as I mentioned, coalition of the willing? This is often voluntary, not mandatory. So, how do you inspire engagement? And then, how do you create greater transparency, visibility throughout the supply chain? In other words, clue everyone in to measure goals and move forward year on year against your goals. So those are themes that run through some of the stories I'm going to tell today. I'm going to first tell you a little bit about me and Citizen, and then reflect on some of the lessons learned through what I'm calling mini cases, kind of speed cases, given, I want to speak for about 40 minutes and then have enough time to take your questions. But we'll cover, examples in the realm of for-profit corporations, some of the biggest like Walmart, associations and municipalities, and then NGOs. So let's start with some inspiration. I'm going to share some inspiration of mine in terms of my personal pivot. I'm an ad guy basically. I, worked with different agencies that represented Levi's and Apple early in the day, and Gallo, um, and that was in the day, you could say, of one-way communication, pre-internet, pre-social media. But I had a big pivot that happened to me in the 90s, and it wasn't just the rise of internet. As a copywriter, that was hugely motivational to me because suddenly the walls came down. Suddenly it wasn't just one way, it was two-way interaction. That was pretty profound. And storytelling became, you could say, bottomless. You weren't just constrained to telling a story in 30 seconds. So all kinds of possibilities started to take uh, uh, interest me quite a bit. The other thing that interested me was social purpose. This particular book by Jared Diamond, who teaches at UCLA, is kind of a heavy book. It's called Collapse: How Societies Choose to Fail or Succeed. Kind of a big, question, and you should take the time if you're interested to listen to one of his lectures or read the book because he goes through civilizations over time through history, and there's plenty of lessons to be learned there. And it said to me, there's a bigger purpose here than just, cashing paychecks. The other book that really inspired me was a book called Citizen Brand. That was the name of it. And I became good friends with Mark Gobet, the writer, who his thesis, which I found really fascinating, was sooner or later, all brands will have to behave as citizen brands. That means they're beholden to their stakeholders, and it isn't just, one way spoon feeding information, but real interaction, authentic interaction. So we'll be talking about that. Another more recent book, just published last year by Freya Williams, is called Green Giants: How Smart Companies Turn Sustainability into Billion-Dollar Businesses. That could have just as easily said how smart companies embrace purpose to become billion-dollar businesses. And some of those brands, whether it be Nike recently, or Patagonia, Cliff Bar, even Chipotle, despite their difficulties, have embedded purpose into their practices. And there's a lot of lessons to be uncovered there. I'm not going to get to them all today, but that's for your background if you want a reading list. The last one is a book called The Heart of Sustainability: Restoring Ecological Balance from the Inside Out. So you can tell sustainability is something very important to me. And so by, I guess, natural forces of gravity, a lot of the projects we've been doing of late relate to different flavors of sustainability, because sustainability runs through everything. It runs through our food, through our water, through our, built environment, you name it. And so you'll see that come through in some of these cases. So let's dissect this, starting with the very word purpose. Purpose is intention. If you look it up in the dictionary definition, I would say purpose is really about understanding, living, embracing your values to drive purpose. And when you're doing that in a corporate setting, it's not your values personally that you're stapling on or imposing on a company or an organization. As a consultant, it requires that you go through a process of what we call appreciative inquiry to really understand what's authentic about the organization. What do they do well? What do they want to do? So it requires a lot of stakeholder interaction, a discovery process, a lot of questions. And if we have time, I can show you what some of those questions are. But suffice to say, you have to get under the hood to really understand the company or the org and their intention. But I would say this, whether I was talking to Planned Parenthood or the NRA, that living your values can create values, create value, create business value, create societal value, because you want to bring people together in a way where people can understand why they're coming together and be inspired to engage in, whether it's purchase a product or sign a petition. These principles remain, and I've seen them, work successfully across different contexts. So, Citizen Group, I started Citizen in 2006 up in San Francisco, and based on the premise that I'm giving you the spiel about today, because I do believe that brands with a strong sense of purpose inspire deeper engagement, can build differentiation, and create that added value. Particularly, as we all know, as the world becomes more transparent, people want to know, inquiring minds want to know what goes into their food, how their car is built, home products, whatever it may be. There's just such a great opportunity to educate those that want to geek out and know what's under the hood. And there are always people that do, whether you're talking about music or sports or automobiles, you name it. So much has been said about the triple bottom line, and we talk about the quadruple bottom line. We believe that communication unlocks passion when properly applied, and that can create lift and actually help the other three P's towards their end purpose. So don't underestimate the passion part. As Aaron indicated, we work for-profits, nonprofits, associations. I'm going to share some examples. And how to create this so-called marketing spiral where awareness is part one. Awareness is a prerequisite to engagement. People have to know about you or your company. Um, but when they know about you and they know a little bit about the organization's purpose, you can start to create engagement and even loyalty over time if you make good on your promises. And these days, the world is complicated in other ways, and that is media. Everything is media, for better and worse, for both better and worse. I mean, there's so many flavors of media, taxi tops, almost any surface is a marketable proposition, and it's sometimes assaultive, it's intrusive. So, how do you find the appropriate mix of media relative to a company that is going to make the positive impression? That's what we try to do in constructing our programs. Um, so the anatomy part. Purpose is the foundation. That we say purpose underlies all the other activities. Then your platform, your operational platform or your community internet platform can start to engage the supply chain, your consumers, and then products and the positioning of those products or programs, partnerships, ladder up from there. But we would say the purpose is the foundation for everything. And let me share some examples. This one is interesting. This is for USA Network, one of the basic cable networks. I believe it's actually the largest, basic cable network. And why I say this is interesting, it's interesting to me because this started right at the beginning of the Obama presidency, 2008. And we were tasked with, in 2007-ish, to come up with a platform for the channel, for the network that is owned by NBC Universal, that wouldn't just be a cause program that would run for a year or two and expire. Wouldn't just be sort of a hit and run program, but would actually, the objective was to create a long running program that was authentic to the network that they could build upon year on year. So we auditioned different ideas. Could that be in the realm of education, the digital divide? A network like USA could do a lot in the realm of, promoting digital literacy or education. It could be in the realm of technology, could be in the realm of even hunger. What was true? Well, it so happened that the principals, the leadership at USA Network, had done a program called Erase the Hate some years ago that won a Peabody. That became the linchpin because there was interest in the issue of tolerance, again, among the leadership. And we said, that's interesting. Your USA Network and their theme, their slogan was characters welcome. And so we took that theme of characters welcome because they're a character driven network, sitcoms, situation dramas, and said, let's create a program which we called Characters Unite. And it was to promote tolerance and prejudice, combat prejudice, um, based on the idea that we should all appreciate everyone as being the characters that they are. So we use the character concept to try to build appreciation for tolerance, which in this moment, is kind of fascinating because it seems like we haven't made too much of a dent, unfortunately. But the program is still rolling, and I'll share with you just some of the elements of the program. This is the spot that started the program that ran on their air.
I pledge because I want people to see past this and see this.
I pledge because I am not a gardener.
I don't own a laundromat.
I've never been a cab driver.
I pledge because there is no black or white or yellow. There's just us.
I pledge because the good old days weren't the good old days.
I pledge because this world is gonna be better for my daughter.
I pledge because everybody deserves wedding gifts.
No one should be treated differently for how they look.
We're all American immigrants.
I pledge because the view from the back of the bus sucks.
I pledge because it's 2009 and not 1959.
I pledge because I don't believe in racism, sexism, or anyism.
I pledge because it's time.
At USA Network, we believe life is richer when we see past our differences and appreciate each other for the characters that we are. Join the movement. Take the pledge at charactersunite.com.
So as I said, that began 2009, January, actually around Martin Luther King Day, right around the inauguration of Obama. And in the first 4 months, and this was still pretty early days, all relatively speaking, of Facebook, but there were 400,000 pledges over about a 4-month period. And this particular campaign platform was tied to Facebook. So there was a face wall where people could actually add their comment to their pledge. And it tapped a nerve that was rather, interesting, that said people have stories to share, and if you find the right frame. So this was arguably more than the network could have done if they were just promoting their shows. This was good business. This was tapping into something that was meaningful to their stakeholders, their audience, as well as their franchisees. They run on a franchise network across the country, the cable operators. So everybody could find value in a program like this. And, it required content. You have to feed the content like any, website or any initiative. And since that time, they have added different components like a Characters Unite Awards program, a student program. They've done a national storytelling tour. So it's become quite rich. They've engaged in town halls, bringing diverse panelists together to discuss these issues. And most importantly, the backbone of this program was bringing together about 24 different nonprofit organizations around the country that were already doing this work. So USA wasn't presumptive enough to say, we're going to solve this problem alone. They had the media megaphone, so they provided a framework, but it allowed engagement with La Raza, with Amnesty International, with a host of different NGOs that partnered together to run the program. So that's example one, again, in the context of building share. I mean, their business was about business, but in a social environment, how can you separate the two? This is another one. This pertains to Walmart, a whole different animal. And when we first got the brief that Walmart wanted to promote sustainability, it seemed like an oxymoron. It seemed like, a bit of greenwashing maybe, because, what is a big box store, with a flood of Chinese imports have to do with sustainability? But we did find that sustainability has a big component of the S word, the polysyllabic S word, sustainability, is efficiency and frugality, not wasting, which is a value that Sam Walton would have signed up for. And as we talked to them about that, they agreed. And the CEO was firmly committed to bending the arc because they had to, from a business perspective, bring down costs, less waste, and they wanted to engage stakeholders in doing that. But first, they had to convince even their employees internally that this was real. So that was our task. That was our challenge. The first thing we did was selective ads. They were ads, but they ran in thought leader publications, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Roll Call, Magazine of Congress, to say with some substance what they had in mind, that they're heading in a new direction. And they were interested in reducing their carbon footprint. And it started with some metrics, looking at their baseline of how much their emissions were currently and how they were making the pledge to start the shift. Each of these ads, by the way, has a story unique to itself. For example, Waste Not, Cost Not pertained to what became the Sustainable Packaging Initiative, where they score their suppliers. You can read about this. It's really quite impressive, the metrics and the preferential treatment they give to the Unilevers, to the Procter & Gamble's for reducing the size of their packaging, being more efficient with their packaging. They get selective promoted shelf space. And some that don't meet their criteria, they don't carry the product in their store. So they started this report card around about 2007. When we prototyped the program, they first of all have 1.2 million US employees, the size of a small country. So we had to pilot this program. Typically, if you piloted a program, you might do it in 3 stores. Well, we did this in 300 stores to begin with, before it scaled to 3,000 stores. We started with 1/10 of their retail stores. And we started a program called Walmart Smart to promote healthier habits. We started to reframe this academic word sustainability towards health, wellness, happiness, and promoting healthier practices with kind of cheap and cheerful media, just break room media, because not everybody, not all of their rank and file is on internet, particularly at the time, again, 2007. And this little card was the transformative element. We called it the PSP, the Personal Sustainability Pledge, and we encouraged everybody from the CEO to the associate store worker to make one pledge, one nano practice, a thing they could commit to that would make them happier, whether it was cooking healthier meals at home, bike riding to work, carpooling, quitting smoking, and that became contagious. We took this program, we implemented it through these types of training tools, and about 2 or 3 months after the program ran, we started to take cameras out to the stores and interview the employees about how the PSP program was making them feel and the impact it had on their lives. I'll share with you one example through a video now. Oh, coming up. These were some of the pledge buttons that represented pledges that came from the employees.
Hi, my name is Jan, and my PSP is to lose weight and to learn how to recycle. My daughter has seen me change, my daughter and son-in-law. They see a difference in me and the fact that I care not just about me, but about them and their world. I want to help them change their lives. I want to help them change their community and give them hope that there is a world that they could bring children into, we can make the world a better place, not just for us, but for the community, for everyone who lives here. We can make a difference. I mean, isn't that what everybody wants to do? They want their kids to have better lives. They want to change the world. They want to make the world a better place and leave it a better place than it was when they came. Choose something you can get passionate about. If it's losing weight, if it's quitting smoking, if it's recycling, saving energy, whatever you can get passionate about, whatever you think could improve your life and improve your family's lives. Walmart is a big corporation, but this is not Walmart doing this. This is us. Individual associates getting behind this, changing our lives and changing the world.
So Jan there, that was not the type of thing you could script even if you wanted to. It was all extemporaneous. So it really demonstrated to me, and we shot 36 of these that ran on Walmart TV, and like I said, became contagious. It said to me that when you create the right framework, people have stories to tell and they will engage, much like the Characters Unite example. So then the cumulative metrics year on year became rather astounding in terms of, people lost cumulatively hundreds of thousands of pounds of lost weight, miles of bicycle walk or swam, over 9 million pounds of aluminum, glass, paper recycled. People started to take on the little thing, the nano practice they could commit to, but were motivated by the cumulative we effect when you could play back that feedback. And so the data becomes very important, obviously, to these programs. But the framework at the beginning is what kind of sets the table. Another quick example, this one pertains to what's called the green sports movement. It started with one team, the Philadelphia Eagles, and it so happened that the NFL team, their leadership, their ownership, were, you could say, progressively minded, had the foresight that they wanted to embed sustainable practices in the operations of their stadium. So they weren't building a stadium from scratch. They had their stadium, Lincoln Financial Field, but they wanted to retrofit it and start moving forward in a sustainable manner. So, we, working with NRDC, the nonprofit organization, who was doing the science, Citizen doing the communication, we had to go to school on, well, what does it mean for a team to green? We had no idea, to be honest, beyond maybe the surface stuff like waste. But there's obviously waste, transportation, energy, water, pesticides use, procurement, how they write their contracts for preferential, treatment. So all of these things came into play. But it started again with creating the cultural desire, and they asked us to re-examine their mission statement and talk about creating higher performance and higher standards on and off the field. Again, all credit goes to the Lurie's because they, as owners, had this foresight that they wanted to engage with their community in this way. So we started a program, and they gave us the license to mess about with their logo, which was rather remarkable given that it's the NFL and all of the strictures around branding in the NFL. But we created a sort of sub-mark, trademark, Go Green. It certainly helped that their color was green, by the way. But we started to create these large-scale receptacles to create visibility within the sports stadium. And we started to create some billboards that were part of the stadium media. If you go to the stadium today, you will see them. And we took a kind of ESPN irreverent tone to the work because this is sports after all. And this is meat and potato football fans, so nobody wants to be lectured at, but we tried to create a consciousness appropriate to the game. And like I said, a little bit irreverent, but started to embed it in the culture. And then layered on communications in their yearbook, more of a piece that gave substance behind the program, that this wasn't just a slogan, there were the underlying operational commitments. And what happened as a result of that one case with one team is this came to the attention of NRDC's board and Robert Redford, who was on the board. And it was his insight. He said, that's how we mainstream green, through the games we play, through our culture. And he encouraged us to take that program and share it with Major League Baseball. Lo and behold, 2 years later, it took quite a bit of time, 2, even 3 years later, Major League Baseball adopted it. They saw it was good for their business. And they took our playbook, we called them green guides, where again, waste, water, transportation, and energy procurement is all laid out in a how-to manual. So once you got past the why be sustainable, it came down to how do I do it operationally for the front office. So we gave them those tools, we gave them the playbook, and Major League Baseball has since adopted the program. I'll share with you just one of their advertisements that ran during World Series a few years ago now, 4 years ago.
It's happening right now, from the grassroots up. Major League Baseball is going green by making a commitment to more sustainable practices. Working together with the Natural Resources Defense Council and fans like you, the League is encouraging every team to increase recycling, cut energy use, conserve water, and use greener products. Please join us in making greener practices part of America's pastime, now and for seasons to come.
So since that time, MLB has adopted it, but so has the NBA, so has the NHL, the U.S. Tennis Association, and it's become a movement. It really is quite fascinating. It's even operating now overseas. The Tour de France is interested in getting involved, International Rugby League, Major League Soccer. They're all seeing it as being valuable engagement with their stakeholders, which is really quite exciting. And each sport, has a different angle on it, because take NHL, for example, their sport depends on ice. And so, when the ponds aren't freezing in the winter, young kids aren't learning the sport like they did back in the day. They see their sport actually being threatened. So we've started a program called Protect the Ice, which is kind of a double entendre. It's defend the ice, protect the ice. So, each league, as I say, or even each team can customize the basic contours of the program to meet their business and cultural needs, societal needs. But the premise is the same, looking at these practices and creating a framework that provides purpose. So as I said, it's been a ripple effect. And these are some of those websites. So, we developed more than 200 websites. They're templated, so mostly the material is cloned. You could say 70% of it is the same, but 30% is customized to the local team. And that even led to some work with the Super Bowl this year, which we hosted in San Francisco. And I'm going to skip over that in the interest of time. I'll share one more very quickly. This is a project, and this relates to a municipality, the city of Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh has an air quality problem, much like LA historically has had a bad air quality problem. But the problem is it wasn't really acknowledged. It was taken for granted that this is the way our air is. People would wake up and have soot and see brown and weren't really moved to action. It just seemed like it was overwhelming in a way, and it was just embedded in the context of the region. But in fact, so much so that people rated potholes as a bigger priority than the air they were breathing. And yet the air quality related to childhood asthma, it related to higher incidence of heart disease. So how do you turn that around? Again, some of the same principles, creating a coalition of the willing through a clear purpose and a clear brand. We created a program called Breathe. And what I'll do is I'll run a video that is sort of a synopsis of what was done in the city of Pittsburgh to make the invisible visible and raise the profile of the air quality problem.
As someone that has asthma and someone that is a musician that plays an instrument that requires a great deal of air to play, I think it's important to tackle it.
We have way too much mercury, arsenic, chromium-6, and other toxic heavy metals in the air.
There's no one plant, there's no one business, there's no one activity that creates the pollution. It's everyone is in the game.
Pittsburgh is a great place to live. But if we could see the invisible pollution in our air, we'd realize the air quality in our region is among the worst in the nation. And our exposure to these particulates leads to increased risk of illness, disease, and higher mortality rates. But there are solutions. The Breathe Project is about all of us working together to improve our air for the health of our families and economy. Be part of the solution at breatheproject.org.
When our employers build greener buildings, we reduce air pollution and the risk of asthma and respiratory illness, which supports other building projects. You can improve our air and our health. Connect the dots at breatheproject.org. Did you know every time you bike instead of drive, you not only reduce our region's air pollution, you reduce the risk of asthma and respiratory illnesses, not to mention improving your already youthful figure.
So that's the roll up for the integrated program. You know, it's much easier to create a campaign than it is a community or a movement. People talk about community building a lot and creating a movement. It isn't just instantaneous. It really does require persistence and money and support that you need to keep building. But again, my essential message to you is having that clear purpose is paramount to laddering up and building any kind of program in almost any kind of context these days. And with that, I'll open it up to questions.
How do you create a program for a product that is not sustainable? I mean, take something like petroleum. How would you start to create a project around something like that?
Well, yeah, sure. Question is a very good one. How do you create a program for a product that isn't sustainable? In fact, maybe, you know, the opposite of that, like in the context of a petroleum, you know, product. I think some of the framework still pertains. I know the discovery questions would still be the same. Appreciative inquiry about what is true and authentic about this company. What have they done? What are they doing? Uncovering those stories of, and so this is the way I would start. I would start with these same questions like these. How do you make life and business better? How do we, putting yourself in the shoes of your client, make life and business better for customers? And they have an answer, no doubt, a real answer, to understand what are the values that underlie the company. Having a clear understanding, again, so you're not imposing those. It's your job to define them by surfacing those answers. And then, you know, what are their objectives and what obstacles prevent them from achieving their objectives or their ambitions? What are the insights that can overcome those obstacles? Having very candid conversations about those things becomes really important, not just surface, to really understand what are the impediments to their future success. So it's questions like that, I think, that play a role in defining their purpose that is authentic to them. And once having done, you can start to create a framework and build it very much, I would say, the same way as some of the programs I was presenting.
You've showed us examples in the sustainability space, obviously, that you've had tremendous success with our new political leadership not necessarily supporting that quite as much, and kind of comparing that to maybe new leadership that might even come into an organization. How then do you work with that? I mean, this, you know, the nation versus, you know, a company, when that is completely tossed out the window and have to start over, and something that is such a big movement that may come to a grinding halt.
Believe me, I've been thinking about this. Believe me, I've been thinking about this. But two things. One is, I don't think it's coming to a grinding halt. You know, by virtue of the fact that, and again, I'm just speaking about our situation, I think we're very fortunate to live in California. California is the 5th largest economy in the world. It went from 9th to 8th to 7th. We're now the 5th largest economy in the world. We're leading on clean energy. Our commitments here are, you know, law. So that trajectory won't change overnight. And I happen to think that, yes, there's going to be challenges as oil and gas get the backing now, but it doesn't necessarily mean that solar, wind, and the new technologies are going to stop. I think quite the opposite. And the other part of that question is, you know, I guess I have to eat the dog food. If I talk about living one's values, these are my values. For my company, I want to apply them, and water will seek its own level. There will be certain clients that, we are not a match for. So I think that comes down to every individual. And I think that's great, actually, because I think, there was that adage, all politics are local. Tip O'Neill, I think all politics are personal. And I think business is social, and I think business is personal. I think we all have to say, what do we want to be when we grow up, and start to apply our skills with intention and purpose. And so we'll all make those determinations ourselves.
So when you're working with organizations outside of the U.S., what are some of the challenges in understanding the context that they're in, their reality with their consumers, and things that might not translate so well?
I'm sorry, in the international context?
Yeah, with organizations that are outside of the United States, what are some of the challenges in working through, because obviously they have different political and legal and economic system and different priorities with their customers. Have you run into any?
Usually in the area of communications, it's more on the cultural sensitivity side than the sort of operational impediments and tax structures or any of those issues that we don't necessarily get involved with. We work, for example, with the International Portuguese Cork Association. Turns out that cork and wine is $1 billion business. And we work with Amnesty International. But those relate more to not just translation, but there's a word called transcreation, where you're coming up with programs and campaigns that you clearly need to test in the cultural context of where the program is going to run, and refine it accordingly. But that doesn't just pertain to international context. Even when we're working, say, we did a program in Phoenix to create a purpose-driven program called Reimagine Phoenix. In the Phoenix metro region, which is the fourth fastest growing region in the US, 50% are Hispanic. So Spanish speaking, at least half. And so how you take a particular concept and ensure that visually and verbally it's connecting with a culture even close to home requires the same process. Transcreation, which, like I said, it's piloting programs, it's translating them, but with partners on the ground that can see the blind spots if a particular idea doesn't resonate. Anyone else?
On a more general perspective, how does the U.S. compare to other countries, and what lessons can we learn from other countries?
In what context?
So in a broader context, so the U.S., how does it compare with these projects to other countries, and what can we learn from other places, other countries?
There are many wonderful programs, obviously, throughout the world related to social purpose. And I think it requires an examination of each on the ground with an understanding of the cultural context in which it runs. It's a very generalized answer. I'm not sure I'm answering the question fully, but the UN, for example, now has a framework called the Global Goals. Are you familiar? Is anybody? Yeah, 17 global goals, whether it relates to water, poverty, social issues that affect populations everywhere. And you can see good work being done and appreciate it, no matter whether it's in Latin America or Africa or where have you. But it doesn't necessarily mean it will work here. but sometimes we do see commonalities in, approach. It just requires homework to get specific.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.